Hello, guys. Welcome back to another week of remote learning. I just want to say how proud I am for all of you that are putting in so much effort and submitting all your work. You're doing really well, and I'm super, super, super impressed. Today, we are going to continue reading The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Please make sure that you are reading the sections in red on the video. And if you can, make sure you're reading them aloud. It's really important that we practice reading aloud and working on our spoken English as well as our written English, because it is equally as important. All right, let's get into it. And as always, I'm going to be using this red laser to help you follow along. All right. Some months earlier, just after Father received the new uniform, which meant that everyone had to call him Commandant, and just before Bruno came home to find Maria packing up his things, Father came home one evening in a state of great excitement, which was terribly unlike him, and marched into the living room where Mother, Bruno, and Gretel were sitting reading their books. "Thursday night," he announced. "If we've any plans for Thursday night, we have to cancel them." "You can change your plans if you want to," said Mother, "but I've made arrangements to go to the theatre with—" "The Fury has something he wants to discuss with me," said Father, who was allowed to interrupt Mother even if no one else was. "I just got a phone call this afternoon. The only time he can make it is Thursday evening, and he's invited himself to dinner." Just before we carry on, I think it's important for you to understand that this piece of punctuation here means that the mother has been interrupted. So if you see that, you know that they have been interrupted, which means that the speech that's coming after it is probably really quick and really rushed. So you need to kind of imagine how that would play out if you were watching this as if it was like a play or a movie. All right, let's carry on. Mother's eyes opened wide and her mouth made the shape of an O. Bruno stared at her and wondered whether this was what he looked like when he was surprised about something. "But you're not serious," said Mother, growing a little pale. "He's coming here? To our house?" Father nodded. "At 7 o'clock," he said, "so we'd better think about something special for dinner." "Oh my," said Mother, her eyes moving back and forth quickly as she started to think of all the things that needed doing. "Who's the Fury?" asked Bruno. "You've pronounced it wrong," said Father, pronouncing it correctly for him. "The Fury," said Bruno again, trying to get it right, but failing again. "No," said Father, "oh, never mind." "Well, who is he anyway?" asked Bruno again. All right, pause the video and read this red section aloud if you can, or in your head if you can't, and then come back so we can carry on. All right, let's carry on. Gretel sat down again, disappointed, but stuck her tongue out at Bruno nonetheless. "Is he coming alone?" asked Mother. "I forgot to ask," said Father, "but I presume he'll be bringing her with him." "Oh my," said Mother again, standing up and counting in her head the number of things she had to organise before Thursday, which was only 2 evenings away. The house would have to be cleaned from top to bottom, the windows washed, the dining room table stained and varnished, the food ordered, the maids' and butlers' uniforms washed and pressed, and the crockery and glasses polished until they sparkled. Somehow, despite the fact that the list seemed to grow longer and longer all the time, Mother managed to get everything finished on time, although she commented over and over again that the evening would be a greater success if some people helped out a little bit more around the house. An hour before the Fury was due to arrive, Gretel and Bruno were brought downstairs, where they received a rare invitation into Father's office. Just pause for a second. The word rare, when something is rare, it means that it doesn't happen often or it's not likely to happen. So you might say it is rare for people to win the lottery because it's something that doesn't happen often. All right, let's carry on. Gretel was wearing a white dress and knee socks, and her hair had been twisted in corkscrew curls. Bruno was wearing a pair of dark brown shorts, a plain white shirt, and a dark brown tie. He had a new pair of shoes for the occasion and was very proud of them, even though they were small for him and were pinching his feet and making it difficult for him to walk. All these preparations in fine clothes seemed a little extravagant, all the same, because Bruno and Gretel weren't even invited to dinner. They had eaten an hour earlier. "Now, children," said Father, sitting behind his desk and looking from his son to his daughter and back again as they stood before him, "you know that there is a very special evening ahead of us, don't you?" They nodded. "And that it is very important for my career that tonight goes well." They nodded again. "Then there are a number of ground rules which need to be set down before we begin." Father was a big believer in ground rules. Whenever there was a special or important occasion in the house, more of them were created. "Number 1," said Father. "When the Fury arrives you will stand in the hall quietly and prepare to greet him. You do not speak until he speaks to you, and then you reply in a clear tone, enunciating each word precisely. Is that understood?" Just pause for a second. Enunciating. When you enunciate, you pronounce the words properly without missing any kind of syllables or letters. So, for example, if I said water, that's not enunciating. But if I said water, water, I'm enunciating because I'm saying the T sound, and that's what Bruno's dad wants them to do. Let's carry on. "Yes, Father," mumbled Bruno. "That's exactly the type of thing we don't want," said Father, referring to the mumbling. "You open your mouth and speak like an adult. The last thing we need is for either of you to start behaving like children. If the Fury ignores you, then you do not say anything either, but look directly ahead and show him the respect and courtesy that such a great leader deserves." "Of course, Father," said Gretel in a very clear voice. "And when Mother and I are at dinner with the Fury, you are both to remain in your rooms very quietly. There is to be no running around, no sliding down banisters," and here he looked very deliberately at Bruno, "and no interrupting us. Is that understood? I don't want either of you causing chaos." Bruno and Gretel nodded, and Father stood up to indicate that this meeting was at an end. "Then the ground rules are established," he said. Okay, pause the video, read this section, and then come back. Okay, let's carry on. The Fury was far shorter than Father, and not, Bruno supposed, quite as strong. He had dark hair, which was cut quite short, and a tiny moustache, so tiny, in fact, that Bruno wondered why he bothered with it at all, or whether he had simply forgotten a piece when he was shaving. The woman standing beside him, however, was quite the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life. She had blonde hair and very red lips, and while the Fury spoke to Mother, she turned and looked at Bruno and smiled, making him go red with embarrassment. "These are my children, Fury," said Father, as Gretel and Bruno stepped forward. "Gretel and Bruno?" "And which is which?" the Fury said, which made everyone laugh except for Bruno, who thought it was perfectly obvious which was which, and hardly cause for a joke. The Fury stretched out his hand and shook theirs, and Gretel gave a careful, rehearsed curtsy. Bruno was delighted when it went wrong, and she almost fell over. "What charming children!" said the beautiful blonde woman. "And how old are they, might I ask?" "I'm 12, but he's only 9, said Gretel, looking at her brother with disdain. "And I can speak French too," she added, which was not strictly speaking true, although she had learned a few phrases in school. "Yes, but why would you want to?" asked the Fury, and this time no one laughed. Instead, they shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, and Gretel stared at him, unsure whether he wanted an answer or not. "Oh, it seems that Gretel has been made to feel really uncomfortable. I wonder what the Fury, who's clearly a really important leader, thinks about French people or other people that aren't from Germany." The matter was resolved quickly, however, as the Fury, who was the rudest guest Bruno had ever witnessed, turned round and walked directly into the dining room and promptly sat down at the head of the table, in Father's seat, without another word. A little flustered, Mother and Father followed him inside, and Mother gave instructions to Lars that he could start heating up the soup. "I can speak French too," said the beautiful blonde woman, leaning down and smiling at the two children. She didn't seem to be as frightened of the Fury as Mother and Father were. "French is a beautiful language, and you are very clever to be learning it." Okay, pause the video and read this section here, please. Okay, let's carry on. I don't normally wear my hair in curls, said Gretel, jealous of the attention that her brother was getting. But why not? Asked the woman. It's so pretty that way. Eva! Roared the Fury for a second time, and now she started to walk away from them. It was lovely to meet you both, she said, before stepping into the dining room and sitting down on the Fury's left-hand side. Gretel walked towards the stairs, but Bruno stayed rooted to the ground, watching the blonde woman until she caught his eye again and waved at him, just as father appeared and closed the door with a jerk of his head, from which Bruno understood that it was time to go to his room, to sit quietly, and not to make any noise, and certainly not to slide down any banisters. The Fury and Eva stayed for the best part of 2 hours, and neither Gretel nor Bruno were invited downstairs to say goodbye to them. Bruno watched them leave from his bedroom window, and noticed that when they stepped towards their car, which he was impressed to see had a chauffeur, the Fury did not open the door for his companion, but instead climbed in and started reading a newspaper, while she said goodbye once again to Mother and thanked her for the lovely dinner. Just before we carry on, a chauffeur is someone that drives your car for you, so it indicates that the Fury is really powerful and really rich. What a horrible man, thought Bruno. Later that night, Bruno overheard snippets of Mother's and Father's conversation. Certain phrases drifted through the keyhole or under the door of Father's office, and up the staircase and round the landing and under the door of Bruno's bedroom. Their voices were unusually loud, and Bruno could only make out a few fragments of them. To leave Berlin, and for such a place, Mother was saying. No choice, at least not if we want to continue, said Father. As if it's the most natural thing in the world, and it's just not, said Mother. What would happen is I would be taken away and treated like a, said Father. Expect them to grow up in a place like this, said Mother. And that's an end to the matter. I don't want to hear another word on the subject, said Father. That must have been the end of the conversation, because Mother left Father's office then and Bruno fell asleep. A couple of days later, he came home from school to find Maria standing in his bedroom, pulling all his belongings out of the wardrobe and packing them in 4 large wooden crates, even the things he'd hidden at the back that belonged to him and were nobody else's business. And that is where the story began. All I know is this, began Shmuel. Before we came here, I lived with my mother and father and my brother Joseph in a small flat above the store where Papa makes his watches. Every morning we ate our breakfast together at 7 o'clock, and while we went to school, Papa mended the watches that people brought to him and made new ones too. I had a beautiful watch that he gave me, but I don't have it anymore. It had a golden face, and I wound it up every night before I went to sleep, and it always told the right time. What happened to it? Asked Bruno. They took it from me, said Shmuel. Who? Okay, pause, read this, and then come back so we can carry on. All right, let's carry on. Yes, but they're different, aren't they? Said Shmuel. No one's ever given me an armband, said Bruno. But I never asked to wear one, said Shmuel. All the same, said Bruno. I think I'd quite like one. I don't know which one I prefer, though. Your one or Father's. Shmuel shook his head and continued with his story. He didn't often think about these things any more, because remembering his old life above the watch shop made him very sad. We wore the armbands for a few months, he said, and then things changed again. I came home one day and Mama said we couldn't live in our house any more. That happened to me too, shouted Bruno, delighted that he wasn't the only boy who'd been forced to move. The Fury came for dinner, you see, and the next thing I knew we moved here. And I hate it here, he added in a loud voice. Did he come to your house and do the same thing? No, but when we were told we couldn't live in our house, we had to move to a different part of Krakow, where the soldiers built a big wall, and my mother and father and my brother and I all had to live in one room. Okay, pause and read this little section here. Okay, let's finish this bit off. All of us, said Shmuel, nodding his head. 11 in total. Bruno opened his mouth to contradict him again. He didn't really believe that 11 people could live in the same room together, but changed his mind. We lived there for some more months, continued Shmuel. All of us in that one room. All right, we're going to find out what happens next week. But before that, can you please make sure you log on to Show My Homework and complete the quiz titled English Monday the 25th of January. and I will see you in tomorrow's video.